Let's move on, but remarkably we have reached the final fans pulse of episode 11. You have voted, we have listened. We're going to stand down our club spotlight this week because no one voted for one, but we will keep nominating some clubs to do a club spotlight on. We're going to talk about a subject which has been well chronicled, it has been well covered in other forums, but we haven't done it yet on 360 Speedway. And it is one, I think, that piques a lot of people's interest. We're going to talk about riders who could have, should have been world champion, but didn't quite make that top step on the world championship podium. So gents, I was looking at the history of all the world champions down the years in Speedway. You go back almost 100 years. And obviously there's lots of very, very good names on there, and some feature more than once, some feature in the top three more than once. But along the way, there are some riders who feature in the top three a couple of times, but never top spot in a world championship. Nigel, I'll come to you first because you've got a better memory than I've got. So thinking back, Nigel, any era at all, of course, in the sport, what riders might you have seen firsthand, Nigel, who really ought to have landed a world title but didn't quite manage it?
Probably the biggest favourite one, and one that's been talked about for many years, Dave Jessup. Going back to my time, obviously, and before. David, I think he win most of his races. And he was winning one, and I think, was it a circlip or something in the car broke when he was winning. Otherwise, he'd have won the world final. I think that might have been at Wembley as well. I'm not sure. But I think there was on maybe a couple of occasions where mechanical failures, and this wouldn't be anything to do with DJ because he was very methodical, very well turned out, very professional, but it just didn't go right for him on the night. And mechanical breakdowns, no fault of his, I'm sure, because you would make sure for a world final everything was right. Every last penny was spent to make sure everything was right. And as I say, I think he would have won it that year if it hadn't have been for I can't remember if it was a Jubilee clip or something in the carburetor it went. Okay. I can't remember. But he would have won it that year. So to my mind.
Is Dave a rider, Nigel, who might have benefited from the Grand Prix back in the day?
I think Dave Jessup would have done because he was classy. He was DJ in his time. He'd have been consistent enough, I think, to have been up there. Who knows whether he would have been good enough to win it over 10 rounds? I don't know. On that night I'm talking about, he was certainly good enough to win it that night and should have won it. But hey, the gods said something else, and maybe an American won it or something. I don't know.
I can remember as a lad. My favourite TV programme when I was a lad back in the day was Superstars. Remember David Vine and Superstars? And Peter Collins used to appear on it, and I'm sure Dave Jessup was on Superstars once or twice. I'm sure he was.
Might have been. I mean, Dave Jessup, they're a very, very good rider and very underrated. I don't know why. Because he was always a top line rider, always up there, top of the averages, and a very good rider, but it just didn't go for him. And that wasn't because he didn't have the bottle for it or it went wrong for him. He couldn't handle nothing whatsoever to do with that. It was purely down to one mechanical problem, really, what stopped him winning the world final. So for my mind, Dave Jessup. I know other two lads will have others to say, and I reckon I know one that might crop up, one name, and if it does, I'd like to say something. Are we
going to play bingo here, Nigel? Right? You keep your powder dry. Dave Jessup was a very good golfer, if I remember correctly, as well,
and still is.
Still is. There we are.
I think so. I believe so. Yeah.
Stuart McDonald. What names pop into your head in the area of never quite should have been world champion but never managed to do that?
I think Nigel could have got this one quite easily, but Lee Adams probably.
I knew you were going to say him. I knew Lee Adams had come up.
Do you know what? He's probably been the most consistent rider never to win a world championship. Nigel was talking about Dave Jessup. I watched actually that on YouTube, Nigel. I didn't realise that until a couple of weeks ago that actually cost him that. But Lee Adams, I mean, he just sat in his armchair and was never phased. The guy was just I don't know, 5-6 years, he was probably the best rider in the world, without doubt. You know, he was winning everything other than that main title. You know,
I'd have to maybe disagree with you there, Stuart. I knew one of you would say Lee Adams, who was a terrific rider, a great rider, but was Lee one that would put himself in? I mean, great rider, don't get me wrong, but he never put himself in danger, wouldn't Lee? That's maybe why Lee didn't win the world final. I don't know, that's just my thought.
Do you know what, Nigel? I don't disagree with you with it. I'm watching Lee. Lee was never an outside man. You wouldn't see Lee going round the boards. Lee was always inside, armchair. But you know what? For his consistency over the years with the podiums, the top 3, the top 4, you know, you couldn't knock the guy. I think that without doubt, in my eyes, in my era, you know, he should have won it maybe twice, 3 times, really. But like Nigel says, maybe that little bit at the end, that little bit more vengeance that he needed to get there, cost him. But another one as well that I don't know if you will remember him, but the Polish rider Jarek Campbell. You know, Jarek Campbell was second, third. You know, and for I don't know about 12, 15 years, you know, Jarek Campbell was just at the top of the game. He really was. I mean, it took Thomas Golob 16 years, 16 tries, and let's be serious. If he hadn't won that, he'd have been down as the best to win it.
Yes.
He would have. So, you know, there's a couple of guys there that you think, you know what, they comfortably should have been world champions, I think, especially Lee Adams, without doubt.
No, a couple of good nominees, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Lambert, what about you?
You've left me last, haven't you? I'm the youngest. So
I'll give you more thinking time, Simon. Yeah.
No, I was going Lee Adams. Like you say, he was number 1 in Britain for all them years. I agree with what Crabby said. He was very electric from the gate, but if you knew you'd got Nicky coming, say, behind you, or Crumpy in his era, like, you knew where Lee was going to be. So, yeah, but, I mean, obviously... So I'll have to skip this as such, but one rider who would have probably been world champion, we'll go for that. Now, obviously, Darcy Ward.
Yeah.
He was.
Well done,
I think he was destined to be it. I remember when Buster brought him over from Australia, he signed for my dad's team, Boston. That's where his career started, and I remember his first ever meeting was at Buxton.
Wow.
I think he only got 18 that day at number 7 from 6.
I can remember him coming to Stoke, Simon. Remember him coming to Stoke. I remember Darcy coming to Stoke the first time he come, and it was just incredible. Such a shame.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I remember sort of seeing him. You know, he was on the blooming Buster's power slide bikes, and he just, you know, probably never been serviced or washed properly in 10 years. And only got 18, and then about 2 months later, he's on all this top equipment, sponsored to the eyeballs and whatnot, and people had took note. So I think he would have been world champion.
I'm sure.
If we're talking sort of nowadays, who could be a world champion nowadays if he was allowed back in the GPs would be Emil.
Yeah.
I think Laguta as well.
I don't know about Laguta now, but I feel very sorry for Laguta. I mean, the year he was world champion, he, you know, like you said, he was Mr. Consistent. He was phenomenal. What went on in, you know, the politics of the world. It's kind of the forgotten world champion, I think, and the forgotten man. He never got to, he was world champion, but he never got to retain that world title, did he?
No.
Like, I guess if you end at the top, maybe. But would he do it now? I don't know. I mean, I'm not being rude. I don't think he scores maximums in Poland now every week like he was. But obviously, Emil, I would love for Emil to be in it. I mean, no disrespect to any of the boys, but obviously I'd see who's in the GP qualifier. Like, if you look back from 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, the boys that had to go to the GP qualifier to potentially get into the Grand Prix, to the product that you're going to have next year. Like, really?
Yeah.
Like,
It's criminal him not being there, isn't it? Criminal Emil not being in there.
Yeah, of course. You know, it's a very good field this year, but it's not as strong as it used to be, really, I don't think.
I don't think so.
I think it's going to get weaker next year. So, yeah, that's just the way it is. But obviously, Lee Adams should have been, Darcy would have been, and Emil could be.
Hey, and one other we're forgetting, you know, Englishman, Kenny Carter should have been.
Kenny Carter,
if it hadn't been in America, he'd have been world champion, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know, Grabby. That was your time.
Watch it on YouTube, Simon.
Have you ever watched it, Simon? Out of interest, have you seen it, Simon, on YouTube?
No.
You should
It was bro, honestly, the mask was on. It was unbelievable. Watch it.
It's worth watching. Yeah.
Nearly as bad as what happened in the Grand Prix last week.
I was waiting for you to say that. You wouldn't have excluded Thompson, no?
Well, you know, but no, Kenny Carter, I mean, I knew Kenny very well because he didn't live far from us and everything when we were young, and he was desperate to win. He desperately wanted to be a world champion, and probably one of Kenny's problems. He said what he thought. Being a Yorkshireman, he said what he thought, and it upset a lot of people.
He was a very driven individual, Nigel, wasn't he? He was
very much so. Very much so, Derek. You wouldn't believe how much so. He desperately wanted to be world champion, and I believe he would have been in America if that position had have been any other country in the world. Penhall would have been excluded.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah,
100%.
Without a shadow of a doubt. But it were in America. Danish referee daredn't go against this, 60,000 American crowd. They'd have probably strung him up, wouldn't they? And they wanted the golden boy at the time, Bruce Penhall, with his long blonde hair. Nah, not me. No, I'm not a fan of his.
Well, listen, I had 5 minutes together earlier, and I scribbled down some names, which I'm about to read off just now. So, pin your ears back, Nigel and Stuart and Simon. Tell me if you even have heard of some of these riders. Billy Sanders, I put down there.
Google.
I've got Billy Sanders, Emil Saifuddinov, Dave Jessup was on my list. Les Collins I've got on my list. Stuart, you've ridden with Les Collins. When he was
just his bikes were all Jawa. What were they like, Nigel? Jawa throttles, Jawa clutch. Honestly,
you know, Stuart, I was talking to Les only 3-4 weeks ago, and he was telling me at one point, Les, when he was at his peak, he was sponsored by Jawa and had everything, and that's when Les was at his best. And then they went sponsoring somebody else, took it off Les, and then I think Les had to fund his own racing, if you like, and Les went off a bit then, but certainly, as you say, Stuart, he was thereabouts was Les. Unfortunately for Les, he couldn't gate, could he?
No, that's true.
Gate. See, when you get that Jawa throttle wound up, Nigel, it was like watching a turbine getting quicker and quicker, and he never went in flat out. He was always rolling in and just mesmerising. What a rider to race with.
So back to my list. I've got Les Collins, Kenny Carter I had on there, Nigel. Tommy Knudsen I put in there because Tommy Knudsen was he was a bit of a rider back in the day.
Yeah.
I've got Jimmy Nielsen, who was a quality rider. Lee Adams was on my list. Phil Crump, a little bit before my time, but Phil Crump achieved a heck of a lot in the sport and never
was Nigel's time.
Never did what Jason did.
It was very hard to be world champion in them days, you know. Don't forget now everybody rides in Poland every week. In them days, you used to go to Poland for a one-off world final and that was it. So it was very hard for the lads in them days. And Crumpy, as much as he's Australian, he was British, wasn't he? He lived here all year and he only rode in this country. They only went to Poland, didn't they, in these places for the World Championship meetings, really, and one or two other bits and pieces. But it was very hard in them days. And I think that's why Ivan won so many times, because he was very clever. Really, he was cleverer than everybody else, Ivan was. I don't say he was a better rider than everybody else, but he was cleverer than everybody else.
Yeah.
Smarter. Yeah, he could outwit them and one thing and another. Like, I remember, I don't know if I've said this on here before, when they went to Poland and they had their hotel all booked for them by whoever. And Ivan sent Gordon, his mechanic who he had for donkey's years. Gordon went off in front, booked another hotel, and him and Ivan went and stayed in this other hotel on their own, out the way. Didn't want to know. You know, he's very, very smart, was Ivan. By all accounts, it's only what I've been told, these things, but very smart Ivan was.
I had a similar phone call once from Ivan Major. There's a story behind this, but I'll save it for another day. But I've got an Ivan Major story, and in fact, 2 Ivan Major stories, which I might share sometime on 360. And the final name that I'd written down, a current Grand Prix rider who I've got to admit I would love to see be world champion just once before he hangs up his... Freddie Lindgren, I think, would be deserving of being a world champion.
Yeah, he does.
Gives it 100% every time, doesn't he, Freddie?
He's a Swedish version, and he's a Swedish equivalent to Nicky Pedersen.
Yeah, I mean, he's a hard rider, is Freddie, and you'd like to see Freddie win it, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
you really would.
Yeah,
you'd like.
Well, who's to say? There's 4 rounds to go. Who's to say what's going to happen between now and the end of this year's Grand Prix series? But this is the end of episode 11. Remarkably, thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed this week's content. Please keep doing what you're doing. Keep picking up our content. Please sharing and tagging in your Speedway friends to our social media output. Keep subscribing on YouTube. We're now over 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel, which we're absolutely chuffed with. If you include episode 11, there's now about 14 hours worth of 360 Speedway material on our YouTube channel. So don't save it all for the winter months. You're welcome to watch it more than once. If you haven't seen all of from episode 1 onwards, then sit back with a beer or a cup of tea, whatever your preference is, over the weekend and pick up a bit of 360 Speedway. Simon, Nigel, Stuart, my pleasure to have your company once again this week. Thank you very much. Enjoy your weekends, and back out there on the 360 world. Keep trackside, keep supporting your team, keep supporting Speedway. Look after yourselves, and hope to see you again next week. For now, good night.